In today's video, let us discuss about the difference between a fuse and an MCB. Initially, let's focus on the single line diagram or representation of fuse and MCB. Fuse is represented in many forms. This is a old school representation of a fuse, and this is ANSI representation of a fuse, and this is most popular and widely used representation. In any single line diagram of any circuit, if you see, fuse is represented mostly in this format. In some circuits, you may also find fuse in this form. If the fuse is complete, then it's represented like this, and if the fuse is broken, it's represented like this. And you may also find these are the representation of fuse, but this one is mostly used. Now let us see how an MCB is represented. In most cases, MCB is also represented as a circuit breaker, but commonly MCB is represented like this. If it is single pole, it's represented like this, and if it's double pole, it's represented like this. Sometimes it's represented like this also. Same goes with this. If it is single pole, it's represented like this, and if it's double pole, it's represented like this. These are the basic single line representation differences between a fuse and an MCB. Now, these are the few common characteristics by which I am going to explain you about the difference between a fuse and an MCB. Let's start with the first one, that is construction and operation of a fuse and an MCB. A fuse consists of a piece of wire made up of metal or an alloy which has low melting point and high resistivity. Whereas on the other hand, a MCB is made up of bimetallic strip which gets heated and deflected by bending. The next point is protection. Both fuse and MCB commonly gives protection for overload and short circuit, but mostly fuse is used for short circuit protection. Coming to the next point, it's after trip condition. After trip condition of a fuse is it should be replaced. Once the fuse is tripped, the fuse should be definitely replaced, but it's not in the case of MCB. It need not be replaced. The next point is after operation. After operation of a fuse, it cannot be reused, but your MCB can be reused as many times as possible. Now moving on to the next point, it is short circuit tripping time. It's a very important point of a fuse is very higher than compared to an MCB. The fuse short circuit tripping time is 0.002 seconds, whereas for an MCB it is 0.02 to 0.05 seconds. So here the short circuit tripping time of a fuse is very higher. Overload sensitivity. The overload sensitivity of an MCB is very high than compared to a fuse. The next point is the operation of a fuse and MCB. The operation of a fuse is completely automatic, whereas the operation of a MCB is manual and automatic. In the case of MCB, you can manually trip the circuit or it will automatically get tripped when there is a fault. But it is not possible to manually trip the fuse because you have to use a special device called fuse puller to pull out the fuse, which is not recommended. Now coming to the next point, it is switching. Fuse cannot be used to on or off your circuit, whereas MCB can be used as a switch. You can on and off the circuit manually in the case of MCB, but you might say in our homes we are using a fuse to on and off the circuit by just pulling out the fuse from the circuit. But in most of the cases it's not possible and it's not recommended because there's a high chance of you getting in contact with the live conductor, which is very harmful. But MCB provides a better protection to on and off, so it can be used as a switch also. Another important point why we can't use fuse as switching is you cannot remove all the fuses at the same time. It means if you have a 3-phase motor, you have 3 fuses connected to it. So if you want to use a fuse as a switch, you have to disconnect all the phases. So you can't remove all the 3 fuses at the same time, so you will start removing one by one. If you remove the first fuse, the motor will be still running with the help of the 2 other fuses because these are still connected, and this case is called single phasing of a motor, and it's very dangerous to the motor. Now what is single phasing of a motor? Let's discuss in another video, but this is not the case with an MCB. In an MCB, if you are connected 3-phase supply, you can directly remove 3-phase at the same time. So single phasing is not possible in MCB, whereas single phasing is possible in a fuse. So we cannot use fuse as a switching device. Now coming to the operational safety, MCB provides a high operational safety than your fuse. Because in the case of fuse, as I've explained before, there is a high chances of you getting contact with the conductor. So the operational safety of MCB is very high than compared to the fuse. The last point is cost. Fuse is very cheaper than compared to an MCB, whereas the life of a MCB is very higher than compared to the fuse. Now for a quick reference, I have kept all these points in a tabular form. So please pause the video and just go through these points for your better understanding. That's all for today's video. If you like the video, please do like, share, subscribe the channel. This is Sandeep Shaktri signing off.